Hi everybody, it's Tiffany with Rock Bottom Wellness, and I just wanted to come on to give you guys a little bit of information and education on why calorie counting doesn't work. So this is something that's just been ingrained in us. I don't even think anybody knows how to think differently about this. And so this is why I wanted to come on today to give you a little bit of information and then show you what you can do to do something different for your body and quit beating yourself up. That's the other thing. So I'm going to tell you about why you can stop counting calories right now. I'm going to tell you about what a calorie is. I'm going to get a little bit into some science stuff, which is maybe not so interesting for a lot of people, but what it does is it sort of gives you this idea of where the whole calorie thing came from in the first place. And I'm going to talk to you about how calories affect the body or how it doesn't. And I'm going to talk about why it's about hormones. And I have talked about this with people before. And then I'm going to tell you how you can make a big impact on your hormones. All right, but first of all, my name is Tiffany. I'm a board certified and licensed nutritionist. And I came to what I do now because of thyroid cancer diagnosis. I had been really, really sick for a long time. I just got told constantly that my symptoms of fatigue or weight gain or inability to lose weight all just was because I was too stressed out and because I was getting older. And if you think about how crazy that is, some of those symptoms I was having started when I was about 24 years old and maybe even a little bit sooner. So I struggled with a lot of depression. I struggled with food sensitivities. I just didn't really know it and didn't know why it was happening. So after the cancer diagnosis, I got really frustrated because I thought that having that fixed with surgery and medications that everything would all be better, and that was not the case. And so what I did was had to look at my nutrition and learn that what you put into your body really does affect how you feel, and that it's not just about calories. I learned such a hard lesson in that I was frustrated because I counted calories like everybody does. And I beat myself up and I starved myself and nothing ever resulted in it. And I just, in my core, just did not believe that the calories in, calories out model works. And it doesn't. So something intuitively, I understood that. I witnessed it. You see it at the gym all the time. You see it with your friends. Everybody complains about calories and calorie counting. And I'm just going to tell you why that is. And so you're not crazy. It's true. All right, so let's look at what a calorie is. Like I mentioned, this might be a little bit sciencey, maybe a little bit boring on this part, but it does set sort of the precedence of where this calorie counting thing came from. So basically what a calorie is, it's a unit of measure, just like we use, miles or pounds or meters or whatever it is. It's a unit of measurement, and it's actually a kilocalorie, but we just have shortened it to be a calorie. All right, so it's basically a measurement of heat. And so back several years ago, 50, 60 years ago, I think it was around that time, there's something called a bomb calorimeter that was developed in a lab, or was used in a lab to measure heat from different food sources. And so what they did was basically created a little oven with this calorimeter where they put different types of foods in it and then burned it. And then what that did was cause the water around that calorimeter to heat up. So they measured the amount of heat, the difference in heat that it created, and that became the calorie. So I think what's happened here is that that principle has been misapplied because it doesn't really address how complex our bodies are. So if you're dealing with, heat and energy in that respect, talking about your oven or talking about your thermostat, your furnace, that maybe makes a little bit more sense than taking that information, extrapolating it, and put it into our complex biological systems in our body. So that's why calories have nothing to do with this. So when you are looking back at not that you probably go back to look at these kinds of things, but you should probably remember images like this from high school science classes, that we're just a giant biochemistry, like experiment. Our bodies are so complex, and all of these things happen in our body in different cycles. And you can see that there's nothing on this that refers to calories, all right? So everything that goes into these cycles, which affects our symptoms and affects our ability or lack of ability to lose weight, has to do with the energy that comes from the macronutrients. So we're breaking these down into proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Those are that's how we mostly think about with the types of foods. Carbohydrates can be broken down a little bit further. You can put that into alcohol, which has a different calorie per gram. It's 7 kilocalories per gram for alcohol. But all of those are treated a little bit differently in this pathway. It doesn't mean that if you have protein, an ounce of protein or whatever it is, it's 4 calories per gram, that goes into that cycle and has any impact on your body. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I'm not going to go into any more detail on that, but it's really about the chemical pathways and what our body does with the foods that we eat versus how many calories we are putting into our diet. All right, so what causes weight gain, or what causes the resistance to weight loss? And so this is what is really frustrating for people, because like I said, you go through this thing where you have learned that you need to reduce calories in order to lose weight, and it's all about energy in, energy out, calories in, calories out. That's just a simple balance, a simple formula that your body works in one way, and that is just not the case. And that is, again, that misapplied law of thermodynamics that we were talking about earlier with that calorimeter. It's just not that simple. But we have been told for so long that 3,500 calories is equal to 1 pound. And I think you even hear and read that it says 1 pound of fat. Well, that's not necessarily true either, depending on what's happening. So, the idea is if you reduce your calorie intake by 500 calories per day, that in a week, then 7 days, you should, according to this model, calories in, calories out, you should lose 1 pound that week. All right, so we all know that that's not necessarily true. How many times have you reduced calories even more or exercised more to burn calories that way and actually lost, maybe you lost 5 pounds in a week, or maybe you lost, nothing, or maybe you gained some weight. So it's not so simple. We're not this simple calories in, calories out system. It's not a one-way system. So much more complex, much more diverse than that. So some things we know about this energy balance, and I'm just going to show you, or not show you, but just explain to you a couple studies that were done. So there was this Minnesota semi-starvation experiment. This was done at the University of Minnesota. There's this guy named Ansel Keys who sort of headed the experiment. And what he did is he took, I think it was only about 35 or 40 men, and he put them on a semi-starvation diet. So he found that with their health and with their weight at the time, that they averaged about 3,200 calories per day to keep and maintain their weight. And so then what he did was fed them a controlled diet and moderated the calories throughout this. I think it was a 6-month time frame, maybe it was a year-long time frame. I'm not exactly sure on that. But what happened is that he reduced the calories by 50%. So for the first phase, I think they were down to like 1,500 or 1,600 calories. And so what they found is that these people became depressed. They became obsessed with food. They had, which means like cravings. I hear people talk about cravings all the time. So they became just burdened by food and thinking about food all the time, lost interest. Their sex drive went down. They lost interest in anything else. They just, because of the depression, their body didn't really function as well. Their brain didn't function as well. And so what happened is that, on refeeding, they just, gained their weight back and, didn't really accomplish anything by restricting those calories. So this is semi-starvation. The other thing that was done, this has been done over it was a 7-year study. It was called the Women's Health Initiative, and it was done over 7 years, and it included 50,000 women. So think about this. If you're one of those women going into this study and you're going to go through the process of reducing calories to try to make a big impact on your health, and after 7 years, you have learned that you haven't lost anything, no weight at all. So by the math, they should have lost, because they reduced their calories by, I think it was about 300 per day. I don't think it was up to that 500. So if you do the math on that, they should have lost, 36 to 40 pounds or something like that. And what happens is they didn't lose the weight after 7 years. So that is another example of where calories just don't matter as far as counting them and reducing them. So the reason why this kind of backfires on us is because we end up in this vicious cycle. We eat less, we lose weight initially, but then we lower our metabolism, we increase our hunger, like was found in the Minnesota semi-starvation diet, and then we have this rebound effect. We regain the weight. And this whole calorie counting thing has been shown over and over and over again. I've seen studies on this since I was in college, that it's about a 99% failure rate. But we keep pushing it. We keep pushing that agenda. Our doctors and a lot of dietitians don't know what else to tell us, so they say, eat less calories. I even had an internal medicine doctor tell me that after eating 1,000 calories per day, that I needed to eat less because I wasn't losing weight like I should have. So that just tells you that there's so much of a disconnect here when it comes to what really affects our body, what allows our body to be healthy and have very little with symptoms, and also, release the weight that we don't want to carry with us. So basically, what we need to look at and address is that it's about hormones. So with calorie restriction, like with the Minnesota semi-starvation experiment and with the Women's Health Initiative, you have this calorie restriction, and then we have these hormonal changes, and not for the good. So when we restrict calories, we decrease our satiety, meaning we don't feel satisfied after we eat. We're just constantly hungry. So decrease satiety, increase hunger. And there's studies that show that after 1 year after weight loss, our hunger hormones are still negatively affected. So this can go on and on and on. And from that standpoint, we end up by having this vicious cycle where we have a damaged metabolism, which does no good for us in the long run. So this is not really about a lack of willpower. And, that's something I hear all the time working with the patients I work with. I've done it myself, people in my family. It's just people beat themselves up. They feel so defeated. They feel like they're a big loser because they didn't stick with the latest diet plan and the latest craze and the fad diets and the drinks and the potions and the shakes or whatever it is. It's because those are all calorie controlled types of formats. So they're not addressing the hormones, they're not addressing the nutrients, they're not addressing any of that will keep you feeling and functioning better and will allow you to lose weight. So let's talk about some of these hormones just to get the little gist of what's going on here. So there's many things that are involved in weight loss. Weight loss is very, very complex. The whole energy system is super complex. But when it comes to the hormones, I'm just going to touch on a couple here. So insulin, you may have heard of as the fat storage hormone. So insulin is something that is elevated when you have higher blood sugar, and that's because you're eating the wrong foods and you're eating them all the time. Then there's cortisol, that's a stress hormone. So, a lot of times they talk about when you have a lot of stress, you will carry weight in your belly or in your stomach. They call it belly fat. Central obesity is really common when someone is extremely stressed out. If you have any kind of like chronic condition that is stressful to your body, and if you're not eating right and feeding yourself well, the stress hormones are elevated, therefore, obesity can occur. Then we have the leptin and ghrelin. So these are the opposing hormones that deal with satiety and hunger. So leptin says, you know what, I've eaten enough, I'm full, I don't need to eat anymore. So that helps with satiety. That's the thing that is not improved even a year after someone loses weight. They're still dealing with that never being full feeling, where they're constantly craving, they constantly want more. Then there's ghrelin, and that opposes the leptin. So they work together. So ghrelin is the hunger hormone. That's the one that says, get in my belly, I'm hungry, it's time to eat. So we need something to tell us when it's time to eat, and we need something to tell us when it's time to be full. When you restrict calories long-term, and many of us have been doing this for years and years and years since we've, even thought about anything that we put in our mouth, and that can take a little bit of toll on our bodies. And so it's no wonder where that can be a constant struggle. All right, so when you are eating for weight loss without counting calories, you need to focus on macro. So we all know those people that start the new weight loss program, they join Weight Watchers, again, or they go to, different places that have different weight loss systems. And what happens is they lose weight initially, but then your body readjusts, just like the thermostat on your furnace. When you adjust the thermostat, your furnace will work according to that setting. That's what your body does. It'll set it high or it'll set it low, depending on how you're using and eating the foods you need for your body. All right, let's talk about the macronutrients. So there are proteins. This is when I think of working with people with eating in food groups, people say, well, how many of this should I eat or how many of that should I eat? I focus on my food groups as proteins, carbs, and fats. And this is why. So proteins, let's talk about what they do. They build muscle, they support your joints, so all the connective tissue to keep your joints healthy. It improves your hair, skin, and nails. It makes up some of your hormones. Proteins are important for making sure you have a really strong immune system and help build up your immune system. It repairs tissue. So even if you get a cut on your finger, a paper cut, there's proteins that run to that area in your body and start repairing that tissue right away to protect your body. And protein can trigger insulin. If you eat too much of it, just like a lot of things, if you eat too much of it, it can actually do something bad for you. So if you're eating, a good 3 to 4 ounces, if you're a bigger person in general, if you're really tall, men can eat more, maybe even up to that 6 ounces, depending on, but protein can trigger some insulin response. All right, carbohydrates. So we all know about carbohydrates. They've been demonized a lot, and there's reasons for that because not all carbohydrates should be created equally. So what carbohydrates do is they provide a ton of nutrition. So we get nutrition from proteins and fats, but we get other nutrients or more robust nutrients from carbohydrates because if we're eating the right ones. So if we're getting vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, all those types of things help that system. I showed you that picture I showed you a while back. All those processes are supported by the vitamins and minerals and antioxidants that you get from carbohydrates and our other foods too, but carbohydrates have a lot of them. All right, so carbohydrates, especially the starchy, sugary kind, are readily stored in the liver and the muscles. So you may have heard of people who end up with fatty liver disease. Most times people think of fatty liver or cirrhosis of the liver when it comes to people who drink too much, but it also can be from really poor diets of high carbohydrates and junky carbohydrates. So they're readily stored there, and that converts into fat. And that's what causes some of those symptoms. So like I said, it depends on the types of carbohydrates. If you're eating, processed grains, if you're eating, only a big plate of pasta and nothing else with it, if you're eating cookies and crackers and chips and rice cakes and all those types of things to excess, then those aren't really as helpful for your body, your whole system, and certainly not that insulin response. So veggies, for example, veggie calories will react very different to hormones than the calories consumed via the junky carbohydrates that I just mentioned. So veggie calories are going to not cause as much of an insulin response, and therefore keep your insulin levels low. But carbohydrates in general, they will definitely do that. All right, then there's fats. Fats are a macronutrient that contain twice the energy as other macros, and that's why I think one of the reasons fats have been demonized so much is because that would be an easy way to decrease your calories, because fats have 9 calories per gram, whereas the carbohydrates and proteins only have 4. So they have over twice the amount of energy per gram. Therefore, if you were going to cut calories, cutting fat would be the easiest way to do so. So that's where the premise behind all those fat-free products came from in the 90s, I think specifically. There's tons of products like Snapple cookies, the fat-free Oreos, the fat-free Big Newtons, and all that kind of stuff. But if you're eating an entire box of them, that's not really a good switch. But just because they're low in fat, people were eating so many more carbohydrates because of it, and then that created more insulin spikes. So fats make up the cells. So very, very important. Your body is just a bunch of cells, billions of cells, and fats make up your brain. They make up your hormones, and they make up the nerve cells. So the covering that provides protection over all your nerves is made up of fat. And when that is stripped away, then you have nerve issues and neuropathy issues, and you have people who have some nerve disorders. They don't walk very well. Their gait is impaired. Their motor skills become less. So that's why fats are so important for the nerve cells. And also, it's a part of your skin. We've got people doing plastic surgery and putting fat back into the skin to take out the wrinkles and that type of thing. So fats are super important. They're very, very important nutrient, and we need to make sure we're getting good supplies of that in the right way, of course. So fats are kind of neutral when it comes to triggering a hormone response. So it's pretty negligible what they do to affect our insulin. And then I'm going to stop here for a second. I'm going to share a different screen with you now. So I want to go back to talking about the insulin a little bit. I've talked about it, but I haven't really described what goes on with an insulin spike. So this all is affected by our blood sugar. And so when you are eating foods that trigger blood sugar or cause blood sugar to rise, so that's going to be primarily your carbohydrates. And like I said, veggie carbohydrates, for example, are not going to cause as much of a burst in blood glucose as something that's junky like crackers and chips or whatever. So I just want to show you that when you're having blood sugar dysregulation and you're eating several times a day, this is causing an insulin spike. So as soon as your blood sugar rises, your pancreas sends out insulin to the bloodstream and then takes that glucose and shuttles it into the cells. So if you're doing this several times a day because you're restricting calories, you are eating carbohydrates or foods that cause an insulin response, and if you're doing that several times a day throughout the day, you are constantly having the fat storage hormone in your system. So with that, you're probably having some of these symptoms: blurred vision, brain fog, your blood sugar gets too high. When you get too low, that's what I hear most of the time. When you get too low, you get fatigue, you get hangry. That's those people that are constantly hungry and they get really, really mad when it's time to eat. You probably know those people. You might even be you. You can have panic attacks, night sweats, insomnia. So all of those things affect our insulin level. It also affects how stressed out we are, and it can affect our cortisol. So I'm going to show you this cortisol pattern a little bit. So this is something that your body naturally deals with. Your body is designed to deal with stress, and it's not even always a stress that you're consciously aware of. It can be stress from a chronic condition. It can be stress because maybe your body is sick. Maybe you have the flu and you're just, your nutrients are depleted, or whatever it may be. That can be registered as stress. It's not always because you're planning for an interview or you are in heavy traffic. It's not just those things are more obvious to you. All right, so what happens is that you have 4 surges of cortisol throughout the day. This diagram is very, very much simplified, but it's just showing you the idea that in the morning, you're supposed to wake up and have a cortisol surge to have you alert and awake and functioning and have you, thriving throughout the day. Then it comes down a little bit all through the day until nighttime, when it comes down so that you can sleep, rest, and recover. All those proteins will help repair your tissues, and then you sleep through the night, and then you do the same thing in the morning. The problem is when we are constantly stressed out due to the things I just mentioned, and stressed biochemically because you're not getting the nutrients you need, you're not balancing your blood sugar, this causes your cortisol to rise, and also then can help with keeping the weight on, which is not what we want to do. So we need to address the blood sugar dysregulation, which will address the insulin, which will help address the amount of cortisol because of the stress. So if you see on either side here, low cortisol or high cortisol, you probably have gone between some of those with symptoms, and that just depends on, what's going on in your life and what your system has been dealing with over the course of time. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing again and get back to the rest of the PowerPoint. So we just talked about fats and how that doesn't necessarily trigger that hormone response because it doesn't raise your blood sugar, so it doesn't cause insulin to be triggered so much. All right, so how do we lower our insulin? That's the million-dollar question, but it's not really that hard. It's something that I work with all my patients, whether they are diabetic or pre-diabetic or type 1 diabetic. It doesn't necessarily, or if they're not. So even if you're not diagnosed with something, you can definitely benefit from getting your blood sugar in check. Therefore, you'll get your insulin in check. So you've heard of intermittent fasting, I'm sure by now. People are talking about all the time. It's really not a new concept. Fasting has been done for centuries, and it's something that can really help you manage your insulin. So eating several times a day, like I said, with that blood sugar chart and then with the cortisol chart, if you're eating constantly throughout the day, your insulin is constantly triggered. So then your body is constantly in the mode to store fat rather than use the fat on your body for fuel. So basically you need to stop eating. So stop eating 6 times a day. Stop eating 10 times a day. You might need to start there when you're transitioning into a better way of eating and eat for balanced macros, the proteins, the fats, and the carbs. And then all that should help you resolve so that you can get more into a eating pattern where you're not eating constantly. All right, so a lot of times we hear about, eat everything in moderation. Well, that's not always the key. That's not always the case. If you've been dealing with something for a long time, if you have a very damaged metabolism from restricting calories for your whole entire adult life, then moderation maybe isn't always the best advice. And in fact, when I start working with people, I oftentimes have to go, all in with them. And usually by the time they're ready to work with me, they are ready to be all in. And it doesn't have to be hard. You just have to know what you're supposed to do in order to make that happen. All right, so we need to repair with the macros. So you're going to be eating, or should be eating, really good quality foods. I mean, you don't need me to tell you to not eat processed packaged foods or go through the drive-thru every day. That's not what I'm here to tell you, but I'm here to tell you that eating the macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbs in a balanced way and eating high quality versions of those things, you will repair your body and be able to release the weight. So again, there's calorie counting model that we've talked about for so long and so many years. has a 99% failure rate, yet we keep trying to do that. We keep over and over and over trying to do that. And I'm here to tell you that you need to stop doing that. So thyroid concerns. So if you are someone who has a thyroid condition, if you have no thyroid, if you have a thyroid that's been killed off due to radiation, if you have hypo or hyperthyroidism, if you have Hashimoto's or Graves' disease, you need to be a little careful with calories, and not in the counting for restriction way, but you need to make sure you get enough calories when you are eating. So when you're eating and you are doing some restricting of your time window of eating, it's a lot different if you're eating, 2,000 calories every day versus eating no calories some of the days. So that impacts your body much differently, because by restricting the timing of when you're eating, you are also improving those hormones we talked about, the insulin, the ghrelin, the leptin, the cortisol. You're balancing that blood sugar out. You are going to help your thyroid hormone work better, and all, like the female hormones will start working better. So I have for you in the link of this email, there will be a link for this program. I have this online training portal that's full of education models to help you with not counting calories and dealing with your thyroid hormones. I also will do weekly online consults in the exclusive private Facebook group for this program. You get shopping lists. They're downloadable so that you can take that with you and have exactly what you need when you're at the grocery store. There's no guessing. It's just done for you. And then you get 28 days of meal plans and ideas that are downloadable as well, so that you can plan your meals and make sure that you're getting the balanced macros that you need. And then there's calorie count on them too, as well as macro percentages, just for your information, to help make sure that, especially if you have a underlying chronic condition, that you're not restricting calories. You need to make sure you're getting enough. So that's why those are there. So, and not to mention the nutrition education that you get from me about how you can best support your thyroid while doing some intermittent fasting. And the biggest thing is you need to quit counting calories. You can stop that altogether and just start feeling amazing, and quit wasting time looking in the books for how many calories this had, or looking at the labels for, does this too many calories, does this work in my plan, or I've only have 200 more calories I can eat today, that type of thing. It's just exhausting. It's emotionally daunting. It is defeating, and you don't have to do that. And I hope that this training has helped you understand why you don't have to do that anymore. So like I said, in the email, you'll have the link to the group and to the program. And all it is $147. And there'll be a coupon code for $50 off of that. So you'll get that for less than $100. So the thing is, you can go out for a nice dinner with family and friends, and that can cost $100 at least. This you'll have for the life of the program. So this is something they can do on your own time, get the information, education that you need. You can work it how you need to. You can adjust and modify to your schedule. It's just a really great way for you to quit counting calories, focus on macros, get back to health, improve your nutrition, resolve your symptoms. That's how it works. So anyway, thank you for listening today. I really appreciate it. I hope you found this information helpful and informative, and I hope to see you in the program. Have a great day. Thank you.